We have a lot of news today, and I have quite a few announcements for you, so let's get to it. On the peace front, President Trump helped deliver an immediate and unconditional ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia. The two countries were engaged in a deadly conflict that had displaced more than 300,000 people until President Trump stepped in to put an end to it. The president spoke directly on the phone with the acting Prime Minister of Thailand and the Prime Minister of Cambodia to inform both leaders that unless they brought their conflict to an end, there would be no trade discussions or agreements with the United States. Almost immediately afterward, a peace was brokered that will save thousands of lives and allowed for trade negotiations with these countries to resume, and they have. The president has now ended conflicts between Thailand and Cambodia, Israel and Iran, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, India and Pakistan, Serbia and Kosovo, and Egypt and Ethiopia. This means President Trump has brokered, on average, about one peace deal or ceasefire per month during his 6 months in office. It's well past time that President Trump was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. I know the topic of Israel is on everyone's mind. I have an update from Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who I got off the phone with this morning. Special Envoy Witkoff and Ambassador Huckabee had a very productive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other officials today in Israel on the topic of delivering much-needed food and aid to Gaza. President Trump is a humanitarian with a big heart, and that's why he sent Special Envoy Witkoff to the region in an effort to save lives and end this crisis. Tomorrow, Special Envoy Witkoff and Ambassador Huckabee will be traveling into Gaza to inspect the current distribution sites and secure a plan to deliver more food and meet with local Gazans to hear firsthand about this dire situation on the ground. The Special Envoy and the Ambassador will brief the President immediately after their visit to approve a final plan for food and aid distribution. On the trade front, the President secured a historic trade agreement with the European Union that puts America first and fundamentally strengthens the economic relationship between the two largest economies in the world. This deal delivers on two of President Trump's core promises on trade, supercharging America's manufacturing capacity and opening up foreign market access to American businesses. The deal guarantees that American businesses will have unprecedented levels of access to the European Union markets to export our American-made goods. Also, as part of this agreement, the EU will purchase $750 billion in U.S. energy to strengthen our energy dominance, reduce European reliance on adversarial sources, and narrow our trade deficit with the EU. The EU will also make new investments of $60 billion in the United States, in addition to the more than $100 billion the EU companies already invest in the U.S. every year. All of these massive purchases and investments will happen by the end of 2028. Media pundits said a trade deal with the EU this monumental and beneficial to America would be impossible, but President Trump made it happen. The so-called economic experts repeatedly said that the American economy would be in a recession this summer. Well, summer is here. It's almost over, and that recession does not exist. Yesterday, in fact, real GDP growth in the second quarter increased at a 3.0% annual rate, significantly above expectations. President Trump's America First policies are driving economic growth, as he always said they would. And this growth is being driven by the private sector, not the government. Federal government spending fell for a second straight quarter, while real business fixed investment rose by nearly 2% following its first quarter surge. President Trump is right-sizing government spending, reversing the damage done by the Biden administration, and allowing the private sector to flourish. On May 12, 2025, I signed an executive order delivering most favored nation prescription drug pricing to American patients to stop global freeloading and guarantee that Americans pay the same prices enjoyed by other developed nations. Right now, brand name drugs in the United States are up to 3 times higher on average than anywhere else for the identical medicines. This unacceptable burden on hardworking American families ends with my administration. Most proposals the Trump administration has received to resolve this critical issue promised more of the same, shifting blame and requesting policy changes that would result in billions of dollars in handouts to industry. Moving forward, the only thing I will accept from drug manufacturers is a commitment that provides American families immediate relief from the vastly inflated drug prices and an end to the free ride of American innovation by European and other developed nations. Accordingly, I'm calling on Eli Lilly and Company and every manufacturer doing business in our great country to take the following actions within the next 60 days. Extend the most favored nation pricing to Medicaid, guarantee most favored nation pricing for newly launched drugs, return increased revenues abroad to American patients and taxpayers, provide for direct purchasing at most favored nation pricing. The President's team, including Secretary Kennedy and Administrator Oz, stand ready to implement these terms. The President expects to further engage with them immediately in good faith to deliver relief for American families. For 150 years, presidents, administrations, and White House staff have longed for a large event space on the White House complex that can hold substantially more guests than currently allowed. President Trump has expressed his commitment to solving this problem on behalf of future administrations and the American people. The White House is one of the most beautiful and historic buildings in the world. Yet the White House is currently unable to host major functions, honoring world leaders in other countries without having to install a large and unsightly tent approximately 100 yards away from the main building's entrance. The White House State Ballroom will be a much-needed and exquisite addition of approximately 90,000 total square feet of innately designed and carefully crafted space with a seated capacity of 650 people, which is a significant increase from the 200-person seated capacity in the East Room of the White House. In recent weeks, President Trump has held several meetings with members of the White House staff, the National Park Service, the White House Military Office, and the United States Secret Service to discuss design features and planning.
In light of the release, the declassification of the annex to the Durham report today, beyond any potential prosecutions, the outcomes of which will likely be uncertain, what does the President believe justice for Russiagate ought to entail? Might it include restitution for those whose lives were upended as a consequence of Russiagate and perhaps a major reorganization of the national security apparatus?
Well, I think a major organization of the national security apparatus, at least here at the White House within the National Security Council, has indeed taken place, and the President entrusts his current CIA director, John Ratcliffe, and our ODNI director, Tulsi Gabbard, to make the necessary changes to ensure classified intelligence, especially that could implement or hurt the national security of our country, does not make its way into the hands of irresponsible actors who want to politicize that intelligence for their own end. Since you brought up the declassification report that was put out by Senator Grassley today, I'm glad you brought it up because this should be a story every outlet in this room should be covering. This is further evidence that Hillary Clinton approved the Russia hoax against President Trump. Her campaign financed it. Again, she approved it. And the FBI and the CIA were both weaponized to, as our director of CIA has said, accelerate this hoax against then candidate and former President Trump. To answer the heart of your question, the President wants to see justice served, and he trusts the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to implement that justice and hold these people accountable.
And then on Israel-Gaza, there are some reports that negotiations with Hamas might not be continuing. Did you get any updates from Steve Witkoff on that?
I did. Special Envoy Witkoff is actively talking with our counterparts in Israel about that, and he wants to give some grace to the President so he can fully brief the President on what he's learning on the ground in both Israel and Gaza. But the President put out a very strong statement on Truth Social this morning, which I'm sure you saw, and he said the quickest way to end this entire conflict, the humanitarian crisis that we've seen, and the crisis in Israel that of course started on October 7th when Hamas brutally kidnapped and raped innocent Israelis, that terrible terrorist attack, is for Hamas to surrender, to release all of the hostages, and to end this conflict. And that's what the President wants to see.
Can you give us a little more clarity on the tariff timing? You said that the reciprocals will take effect tomorrow.
Yes.
Does that include the new auto rates, for instance, on Japan, Korea, the EU? Is this all coming effective tomorrow?
So some of the countries you just mentioned, Japan, South Korea, they have bespoke trade deals that the President cut, which, just to backtrack for a second, Josh, we promised that the President would negotiate with countries all around the world to cut tailor-made trade deals depending on those countries' challenges, how badly they've ripped off the United States of America and our manufacturing industry and our workforce in the past. And he has done that. Of our 18 major trading partners, 2/3 of those trading partners have a deal. We've sent out 17 letters to countries around the world. And the rest of those countries that either do not have a deal or have a letter, they will be hearing from this administration by the midnight deadline tonight. So yes, tomorrow, August 1st, the reciprocal rates will be going into effect. If more deals are cut between now and midnight, I will never count out the president. You've seen him do it before. He cut 3 deals in one day very recently. So we'll see what happens. I do know foreign leaders are ringing his phone, realizing this deadline is a real thing for them tomorrow, and they're bringing offers to the table.
Have you talked with the president about his position on the stock trading ban bill before Congress? He obviously had pretty loaded comments about Senator Hawley. There's some reporting that they've since spoken. What is his position on the current status of that bill?
The president has spoken to Senator Hawley, who called him, and the president took that call. As the president said in the Roosevelt Room yesterday, conceptually, he of course supports the idea of ensuring that members of Congress and United States senators who are here for public service cannot enrich themselves. And the reason that this idea to put a ban on stock trading for members of Congress is even a thing is because of Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she is rightfully criticized because she makes, I think, $174,000 a year, yet she has a net worth of approximately $413 million. In 2024, Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio, this was a fascinating statistic to me, grew 70% in 1 year in 2024, and her portfolio outperformed every single large hedge fund in that same year, and even more than doubled the returns of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. So I think the president stands with the American people on this. He doesn't want to see people like Nancy Pelosi enriching themselves off of public service and ripping off their constituents in the process.
Tariff negotiation between South Korea and the United States concluded yesterday. President Trump stated on his SNS, Truth Social, that he would announce the specific details of the investment in the United States at the South Korea United States Summit in 2 weeks. My question is this tariff negotiation a final agreement, or is further negotiation necessary?
Well, yes, as you know, the president met with representatives of the Republic of South Korea here at the White House yesterday, and they did, in fact, reach a deal. And South Korea will pay a 15% tariff rate, including 15% on autos, while providing historic market access to American goods like autos and rice. Korea will purchase $100 billion in American energy by 2028. And the centerpiece of this deal is that South Korea has agreed to invest $350 billion at the president's direction to revitalize American industry. 90% of those profits will go to the United States government to help pay down our debt and for other matters at the president's choosing. So it was a very successful meeting yesterday.
Is he looking to provide any more extensions today after his phone call with Mexico? Is there any other conversations like that?
I do know that other foreign leaders around the world have reached out, and if the president decides to share the conclusions of those calls with all of you, he will do so himself. But I do want to reiterate what the president said about Mexico. Mexico is still paying tariffs. They're paying a 25% tariff on fentanyl, 25% tariff on cars, a 50% tariff on steel, aluminum, and copper. And additionally, Mexico has agreed to immediately terminate its non-tariff trade barriers, of which there are many. And as the president said, we will continue to talk to Mexico over the next 90 days with the goal of signing a larger trade deal. The key to this, again, is Mexico has agreed to terminate those non-tariff barriers and to continue to work with us in good faith. Mexico is a very unique situation of all the other countries around the world because, of course, we share our southern border with Mexico, which we've seen an increase in cooperation between Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum and our administration on clamping down on drug trafficking and human trafficking at the southern border. We appreciate those efforts and will continue to work in good faith and to continue to have these trade discussions as well.
Why does the president think that Republicans are so behind, and has he had any further conversations with Leader Thune about it?
The president has had many conversations with his friends in the United States Senate about advancing his nominees, his judicial nominees through this process. It is critical that we get these good attorneys in these positions so that we can end the weaponization of justice, so we can have true law and order in our country. It's unfortunate the Democrats are playing political games, but the president has made it clear to Senate Republicans they need to do everything in their power to advance the president's nominees as well.
Second question, Caroline, deals with immigration here in America. As you know, a lot of deportation has been going on. ICE has been going after violent criminals that are here illegally, and rightly so. In the midst of that, there are some evangelical pastors who are stating that it may have gone to a point of being indiscriminate and actually getting innocent people, like members of the clergy. Has the president and has ICE looked at that to see how they can actually go after those violent criminals, but also make sure that members of the clergy are still not being deported?
Well, look, the administration has always maintained the position that anyone who illegally crosses our nation's borders is subject to deportation. That's just the law of the land, and we must be a nation that enforces our laws. But the priority from ICE, of course, is to deport, detain, arrest, and remove violent illegal aliens and criminals from our country. And they have been doing that at the rate of thousands of illegal violent criminals every single week, especially in Democrat-run sanctuary cities where these illegal violent criminals have been given a safe haven and have essentially been immune from our nation's laws under the previous administration. That's not happening anymore because of this president and Secretary Noem in the Department of Homeland Security. And we are going to be a nation of laws. And as we've said repeatedly, if you came here illegally, you are subject to deportation. But the priority are those public safety threats that we must remove from our communities.
We heard President Trump criticize President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer for their statement about recognizing a Palestinian state. What is the president's position on recognizing a Palestinian state, and will he recognize Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria?
I can answer both of those questions for you. On the second question about a Palestinian state, the president expressed his displeasure and his disagreement with the leaders of France, the United Kingdom, and Canada. He feels as though that's rewarding Hamas at a time where Hamas is the true impediment to a ceasefire and to the release of all of the hostages. So to your first question, the president wants to see all of the hostages released. He cares deeply about this. He has met with many of the former hostages, many of the families of those who have loved ones who are still being held hostage in Gaza. I have met with them too. It is absolutely devastating what these poor people have been through, and the president is always thinking about them, and that's why he's designated his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who's doing a tremendous job to release the hostages and to end this conflict. But the president has always said the last remaining hostages, now there are 20 living hostages in Gaza, will always be the hardest because Hamas is unfortunately using these innocent people as bargaining chips. But nevertheless, we are committed to seeing this come to an end.
Part of the settlement with Brown prohibits it from performing transgender procedures or prescribing hormone puberty blockers, that type of thing. Will eliminating these types of procedures be a priority for the Trump administration in negotiations with other universities?
I can tell you that ending the chemical castration of children in our country is a priority of this administration. We've talked to many of these universities about it, but the president has also taken very strong action to cut off the funding for any medical institution in this country that provides those barbaric procedures. The Brown University agreement, since you brought it up, is yet another win to root out anti-Semitic behavior on our nation's college campuses and unlawful racial discrimination. Brown has agreed to no longer allow unlawful racial discrimination in admissions or university programming. They have agreed to provide access to all relevant data and information to rigorously assess compliance with its commitment to merit-based admissions, and they will pay $50 million over 10 years to state workforce development organizations that comply with anti-discrimination laws, supporting regional economic growth and career opportunities. Brown will also adopt the definitions of male and female from President Trump's executive order, defending women and gender ideology extremism for women's sports, programming, facilities, and housing. Brown will no longer perform gender gender reassignment surgeries on minors or prescribe them puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. And Brown will take steps to improve the campus climate for Jewish students and combat anti-Semitism on their campus.